So in this lesson, we are going to be looking at production and how it applies again to sports and how to measure it. So one of the most, when you look at outside of sports economics, output is defined as whatever product the firm, the company is trying to produce and sell. Okay, it's pretty black and white. In sports, however, it's not as clear. There are a couple ways to define output. Okay. Output can be measured one example, through attendance at games or television viewers, which, at least on a very basic level, directly relates to revenue the team earns. You can measure it by games played. The more games that are played, the more money the firm can make, the more people are going to view it, so forth. Now, games played varies very differently from sport to sport. For example, in the NFL, you have currently 17 regular season games and two or three preseason games. Baseball, you have 162. Okay, so you have a lot there. Now, I mentioned attendance, television viewers, revenue. That's, a direct relationship. But winning percentage is also something that will lead to better attendance and television viewers, as we previously talked about. And so if you're winning, your team's going to tend to make more money, both by attendance, but also by things like merchandise, television rights, so forth. Okay. Now, this is something we're going to focus on, at least in this video, because it's easier to kind of measure and discuss, with the assumption that the more games a team wins, the more revenue and profits that team makes. So let's look at output and production. So the production function. The production function is the relationship between the quantity of inputs used and the outputs produced from those inputs. All right. The total product labor is the total output that results from some combination of inputs. And so, for example, let's talk about this in terms of basketball for a second. All right. What are the inputs used to win games? The players. And so the total product of labor, the total wins, is going to be the combination of the players that are used on that team. Which is why you see massively different win totals by teams in the NBA, National Basketball Association. The marginal product. The marginal product is the additional output produced from adding an additional unit of labor. Okay. So this is kind of an important term, because one of the things we're going to be talking about at different points in this course are superstars. And a superstar is a player whose ability is at the top of that respective sport. Okay. And so, the superstar status is going to change by year. For a long time, you have players like LeBron James, and still at this point, LeBron James, Steph Curry, Michael Jordan in his time, Wilt Chamberlain, they were some of the superstars. Okay. So the reason why I mention that is whenever a team when a team adds a superstar or a high quality player, it's going to tend to have more wins. But what you have, and this goes with a lot of firms too, outside of sports, you have diminishing marginal returns. Okay, so the marginal product of labor is, looking at sports and specifically wins, is the additional wins you get from having an additional high quality player. Okay, but what happens is, especially in basketball, where one team, there's only one ball to go around, there's only so much time on in a game, there's only so many points the team can score, and so the more superstars you have, the more that ball needs to get spread around, and so the less impact each additional superstar will have. And so what you have is you have this diminishing marginal return. So let's say that you have a team with no superstars, right? If you put one superstar on that team, you will see a big jump in wins. Now, if you add a second superstar, you're probably going to see more wins, but you're not going to see that same jump in wins from going from 0 superstars to 1. All right. And so what's going to happen is you're going to get more additional wins for the first superstar. And then the second is going to generate more wins than the third and the fourth, so forth. Okay? And so what you have is these diminishing marginal returns. Marginal cost is the additional cost of an additional unit produced. And so kind of relating back to that, and so if you have this diminishing marginal return, right, if you're still paying these superstars the same money, which there are exceptions to that, but if you assume that each superstar is paid the same amount and is of the same quality, again, that's a pretty loose assumption there. But if that is the case, all right, and you're getting fewer and fewer wins, which is what we are measuring output here, the Q, all right, then what's happening is each win is going to be costing you more and more money because each additional player is less and less effective. So let's kind of take a look at all that. So here we have the total product, which is the number of wins. Okay? And this is just a measure of what's called offensive talent. All right, so the more offensive talent you have, whether it be number of superstars or just overall quality, you're going to start to see this impact here. So what you'll have is, first, you'll have your total product going up at a fast rate. So the increase in the offensive talent is going to have a very rapid impact on the number of wins. Then you're going to see the number of wins is still going up as you had more talent, but it's going to be going up at a slower and slower pace. And eventually, if you have too much offensive talent, it can lead to problems with, players not being able to play well together, and so you can see a decrease in the number of wins. So the marginal product, which again is the additional output from an additional unit. In this case, it's showing the additional wins from an additional offensive talent. And so you can see that the number of wins is going up for each additional unit of offensive talent, but it's going down. And so that's I guess it's O1 here. Okay? And so also with that here, if you go straight down, you're going to see that when you get those big jumps with the initial increases in offensive talent, each win is costing you less per unit. So you're seeing the marginal cost going down. Right? But then, as that marginal product starts to go down, as the additional wins get smaller and smaller, right, the marginal cost, because you're still going to be paying for that offensive talent, is going to be going up. So you're paying more for each win. So let's look at this with the Golden State Warriors. And so the Golden State Warriors during the 2000s were one of the, if not the best team, especially if you look at the back half of the decade. Right? So let's start with the 2011-2012 season, which was Klay Thompson's first year at the team. And so during these initial years, the two superstars they had were Klay Thompson and Steph Curry. Now you can also argue that Draymond Green was a third-ish superstar on the team. He's a very high-quality player. But just for argument's sake, we're just going to have those two. And so you can see that their win total went up each year during that. And it got to the point where in 2014 and 15, they had 67 wins and won the NBA championship. The next year, they got to 73. And there's only 82 games in basketball, so 73 is high, and I believe it tied the record. Okay. Well, great. So then what happened? So after the 2015-2016 season, Kevin Durant joined the team. Okay. And with Kevin Durant joining the team, he was another superstar and arguably one that was even better than Klay Thompson and Steph Curry. And so when people were looking at the team before that, they were joking, but only half joking, that they may win every game that year. Well, if you look at just the wins, you can see that wasn't the case. So during the 2016-17 season, their win total went down to 67, and then 58, and then 57 during the 3 years that the three of them were all playing together. So here's not only when you just see the declining marginal product, you actually see the negative marginal product where you see the wins going down. Okay? Now, here's why that's a little bit misleading. Basketball has been changing in recent years, and a lot of times, well, two things. One, when the three of them first started playing, it did take time for them to kind of get acquainted with each other, their different games, because before Kevin Durant, you had, the kind of the team running through Klay Thompson and Steph Curry. Now you had another offensive piece of that puzzle that you needed to work in. Okay? So that was part of it. The other part is the goal of teams is not to maximize wins always, at least not anymore. And so in some sports, for example, football. Football is a good example. The goal to win games and the goal to win championships tends to be the same because the more games you win tends to be highly correlated with the chances of winning a Super Bowl. Okay. Same with baseball. And the reason why is that it can be difficult to make the playoffs. Basketball, however, you do not need to have the maximum number of wins to win the NBA championship. Okay? And what you saw, and because of that, the goal was it's not necessarily a short-term goal of winning games. It's more the long-term goal of winning the championship for that season. And so a lot of times teams will rest star players at times, keep them fresh for the playoffs. But for whatever reason, that goal of winning championships did work with Kevin Durant. Now, they didn't win more games, but they did win the championship. And so you can somewhat make the argument that now, granted, this means that if everyone else's team stayed the same, which they didn't during that time, but if it did, you could say that Kevin Durant didn't have an impact because they won a championship before him and after. But this just gives an idea of what the impact of additional star players can be. And it's the same thing with baseball. The New York Yankees win many games, 90 to 110 wins most seasons. But the offensive talent they have a lot of times is much higher than somebody who has maybe 10 fewer wins than them. And it's the same idea that they're paying all this money for additional superstars, not winning too many more additional games. But again, the goal is to maximize championships, which they have done throughout their history. And so that is the idea of production in sports.